Every year, the major tech companies take the stage in dark, crowded auditoriums to reveal the latest microscopic leap in processor architecture, marketing the move to 2 and 3 nanometer nodes as a generational shift. But when you look at the raw silicon, the performance gains are increasingly incremental, often staying within the single digits when you keep the power consumption identical to the previous generation. That performance is flatlining because modern chip design is held captive by a single industry metric: performance per watt. When your data center only has so much utility power to draw from, your engineers are backed into a corner. Every design choice has to prioritize keeping the power draw low rather than pushing for the maximum potential speed of the architecture. This is the reality of the modern era. Every celebrated breakthrough is less about raw speed and more about the engineering required to squeeze performance into a restricted thermal envelope. To prevent power leakage at these densities, manufacturers have to use hyper-dense 3 nanometer nodes. Research and development for these nodes costs billions of dollars, driving the raw manufacturing price of a single wafer to its highest point in history. Which raises a question: if a data center didn't actually have a power limit, would we even need to pay the premium for these microscopic nodes? The speed limit of modern computing is an economic straitjacket the industry built for itself. The Subvertio AI architecture explores what becomes possible when thermal and electrical budgets are no longer the primary design constraints. By utilizing dedicated hydrogen and oil microgrids, this architecture operates independently of the power grid, effectively removing the pressure of performance per watt metrics. Without power rationing, the need to spend billions on the latest 3 nanometer wafers disappears. Instead, the team built their Proto-1A processor core using a 90 nanometer manufacturing process, a node that has been a global industry standard for 2 decades. Legacy silicon nodes leak massive amounts of power, but because their energy source is abundant and off-grid, that leakage is an acceptable byproduct rather than a failure. Rather than relying on tiny, optimized circuits, this architecture uses brute force redundancy and massive physical scale to meet its performance targets. Unlimited energy turns the industry's biggest perceived disadvantage, old, leaky silicon, into a tool for building cost-effective, high-throughput compute. To establish engineering credibility, the Proto-1A core underwent a red team audit. This review replaced speculative performance claims with conservative targets, like a 200 MHz bring-up frequency, ensuring the design remains grounded in pre-silicon reality. This floor plan reveals the strategy. Keeping standard cell utilization at 47% spaces out logic cells for perfect routing and thermal headroom. To handle massive currents from ignoring power efficiency, they overbuilt the power network with dense, thick straps interleaved with cell rows. This physical implementation data establishes a documented path to a foundry-clean tape-out on legacy equipment, showing that high-performance AI hardware can be realized without a 3 nanometer gatekeeper. When power delivery and manufacturing budgets are no longer the primary bottlenecks, the engineering focus shifts. You move away from economic constraints and directly into the hard, uncompromising limitations of physical science. The first limit is heat. When a package draws more than a kilowatt of power, it requires new cooling infrastructure, like microfluidic cold plates, to manage the extreme temperature gradients. The second limit is latency. On a physically massive chip, data execution is constrained by the speed of light traveling across the wires. To mitigate this, the architecture floods the chip with massive pools of SRAM and redundant compute tiles, ensuring the data is processed locally rather than traveling across the silicon. Navigating these extremes requires a new standard of success. In an energy-rich era, the focus shifts from performance per watt to a new metric: intelligence per second. Building at this scale requires active interposers to physically fuse together redundant compute tiles and massive stacks of high-bandwidth memory. This methodology achieves the compute density and memory fabrics required for modern AI by scaling the number of transistors rather than shrinking them. By removing the artificial power ceiling, the future of computing becomes a race of architectural scale, where the brute force of legacy silicon challenges the dominance of the most expensive 2 nanometer chips.